We will not bow down. Let my people go. We will not bow down. Let my people go. We will not bow down. Let my people go. We will not bow down. Let my people go. We will not bow down.
Well, hello and welcome to episode 65 of the Croydon Constitutionalist podcast, bringing classical liberalism to South London and beyond via our YouTube channel and wherever you get your podcasts. My name is Dan Heaton and my partner in podcasting today is Mike Swaddling, the co-founder of the Croydon Constitutionalists. Mike, how you doing?
Well, Dan, good to enjoy our renewed freedom, and interesting to see things play out in Westminster.
Yes, there's a lot going on as we speak today. Well, we're delighted to be joined today by the newly appointed steward of the Independence for Liberty group, Harley Dalton. Harley, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here too.
So, Mike, what have we got to talk about?
Yes, so today we're talking about Freedom Day 2.0 and what's going on around the world and in the UK with COVID and lockdown. We're talking about Partygate, something that's unfolding literally as we speak. The Sugo report will come out as we speak today, and by the time you listen to this, no doubt more will have already happened. And of course, we're talking to Harley, talking about what's been going on, and then giving you a bit of an update, what's been going on our website, and some events we've got coming up.
Excellent. So yes, Mike, as you say, Freedom Day 2.0, at least in England anyway, on the 26th of January. The mask mandates, they've all gone, except for on Transport for London, because Sadiq just likes to be a bit different. And COVID passports for the large events, at least domestically in England anyway, they didn't last very long, and hopefully they'll be very much a thing of the past. People are still catching COVID though, albeit they don't seem to be getting too unwell. Indeed, many of them don't seem to be unwell at all. Doesn't seem to matter whether they've been vaccinated once, twice, or three times. They do seem to be able to get it and to pass it on. So yeah, it's not looking that effective, which is leads us on to what's going on with the NHS workers. And who knows? I'm not even kept up to date with the news today. There's talk of that being this idea of them all getting sacked if they've not been vaccinated. It looks like that's going to be out the window. And Mike, what have you made of the return of at least some of our freedoms?
Well, incredibly welcome. I took the opportunity last week to take a few days away. That covered the period of freedom. I have to say I didn't really notice a difference before and after, but it was good to see. It's good to be able to do things with a surety that you're not going to get caught out. You mentioned there that Transport for London, mask mandate's gone on Transport for London. Hasn't gone on there. My impression is very much it has gone, hence the slip. Lots of people are still wearing masks on buses and trains that I've been on. Not been on the tube for a while, but even then, but lots weren't. And that's, we're getting back to some normality here, and people are taking advantage of it, which is really good to see. The big thing, of course, the NHS workers, the COVID passports have collapsed as an idea. Omicron has completely destroyed the point of them, because vaxxed, as you've said, vaxxed or not, you're still getting it, you're still transmitting it. A terrible abridgment of our freedom, and whilst the way it's happened might be a problem, I have to say I'm very pleased to see the collapse of that god awful idea.
Harley, have you been enjoying your newfound freedom?
Since about March 2020, I would say. I haven't put much faith in the government from the beginning and haven't put much stock in their announcements as they've gone along. So for me personally, the changes have been unnoticed in terms of my daily life. I never went around wearing masks. I didn't get jabbed and have no intention of doing so. I predominantly worked in the office for the the bulk of the last 2 years, and this was something that I made sure was facilitated for me with my employer. So I tried to, as much as possible, keep going as ordinary, meeting friends, meeting family, with no apologies made on my part for that. And so personally, no. And then I guess more socially, more politically, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but I don't think we're out of the woods just yet, I'm afraid. The fact is that we've been led with this carrot on a stick for the last 2 years. We've had, kind of hokey cokey politics, jump in, jump out, lockdown in and lockdown out all the time. And so it's entirely possible that some other kind of justification will come forward for an extension of these rules and extension of these restrictions. So I would keep an eye on that personally. I don't necessarily think that we're out of the woods just yet. And then obviously there's a second aspect, which is the kind of social aspect. I think this is a very serious and pervasive aspect to it, which is that I would say, from my perspective or my perception on this, is that the vast majority of people, were it to come to another lockdown or more restrictions, would probably support them. And I understand that these people that I talk of who would support them and who would continue to believe in a government response to COVID, in mandatory jabs and mandatory passports and all that kinds of thing, those people I still believe are in the majority, and those people make up our friends, our family, our neighbors. There is a deep kind of societal split on this that hasn't gone away. And I believe we in this call here, and probably most of the people listening, are on the minority side of this. So I would look out. I would be wary personally.
Well, it's interesting you say about whether or not any restrictions might be brought back, and what the sort of legislative framework for these sort of things might be. Of course, we've heard that in Scotland that Sturgeon basically wants to keep the powers forever, just in case.
Yeah, comes as a shock to no one, really. Frighteningly, it's funny when you see them do the meme, and that's exactly what Nicola Sturgeon has done there. The SNP have literally proved everything we accuse them of. And it's come as no great surprise to anyone. The only good thing that maybe comes out of that is, if there's one way to possibly break the stranglehold of the SNP on Scotland, she's going about it. Indeed.
Well, talking of some of the English-speaking world, shall we say, or possibly slightly French-speaking world in part of it, over in Canada, there have been some interesting scenes. A load of truckers who've had quite enough of Mr. Trudeau's ideas about vaccine mandates have decided to hit the road and have headed for Ottawa. Mike, what have you made of the convoy?
Well, particularly disappointing out of this whole affair has been the way in which Australia, New Zealand, and Canada have buckled. Parts of the Anglosphere that we thought, or I certainly thought, were slightly more freedom-loving, slightly more robust, slightly more ready to push back than perhaps parts of Britain, are completely buckled to everything of lockdown. And this has been the first real thing I can think of in a fairly mass way where we've seen a big pushback and it gain a lot of sympathy. And there's something here. It's interesting what Harley was saying there in terms of he thinks there's still a majority of people that would be in favour of lockdown. I'd slightly differ on that, but I'm not. I think there is a large minority, certainly, and that's, there's not much in that, if you like. But it's great with the Canadian trucker convoy. What we've seen is people realising suddenly they're not alone. It's being used, it's going through towns, people are going out to support it. They're saying then they can see they're not alone. It's not just them in their house thinking that this is nonsense. Then maybe a friend or a neighbour that meet up thinking that this is nonsense. Actually, it's large parts of their community, and that's really inspiring. The fact it's being copied in places like the Netherlands, and other parts of Europe, I believe, is really good news. And you know, Justin Trudeau talked earlier of a meme. You know, he really is a meme of himself, and the fact that he's chosen to go in hiding at this time is, well, really sums up the man.
Harley, are you going to be joining a convoy soon?
If I could drive, perhaps, but no, I am obviously very much in support of what they're doing there and the kinds of things that they're doing, and particularly the type of people who are doing it. Certainly, if Canada had a sensible, rational leader, would be the kinds of things to see changes made. I mean, you think, obviously, with many countries around the world, Canada is also dealing with huge bouts of inflation and supply chain issues as well, and labor shortages and all the rest of it. And obviously, it being winter as well, you can throw bad weather into there. And so there are all these kinds of strains on the economy there. You know, increased prices on food and fuel and that sort of thing, products not being on grocery store shelves and that sort of thing. And the economy there is very dependent actually on the types of people who are going out to protest here, particularly the truckers, the people who drive the majority of the products which Canada is struggling to obtain across the border from America and all over the country. And so if you were a sensible, rational leader, you would say, okay, we have to hear their voices and we have to accommodate for these people who are saying we won't comply with this because actually our economy to a large extent depends upon them. However, I don't necessarily think that Trudeau will listen. I mean, I was listening either today or yesterday to him speak about these people and saying things like the types of people who are coming in this convoy are often racists, often misogynists. So I don't think that he's taking this seriously. And I actually think that he's fighting back in the typical way that, not to generalize, but the left, broadly speaking, fights back, which is with slurs and reputation destruction. He's not willing to treat these people as conscientious, rational objectors to his irrational policies. He is right in his mind. He is right. And everyone who disagrees with him is a bad person. So it's difficult for me to say, oh, yes, Trudeau will listen, because I don't think he's capable of doing that.
I saw Jordan Peterson has called on the Canadian Conservative Party to get behind the truckers and to actually stand up for freedom and a return to something, you know, more like normality rather than just going along pretty much with whatever Trudeau says.
Yeah, and we're seeing some of the provinces start to push back a bit as well. So I think Harley's right. I don't see Trudeau coming around to this. The only thing I think that can happen and will happen in a number of countries around the world is as the ludicrous scenario that is lockdown, particularly lockdown against Omicron, particularly vaccine passports against Omicron, you know, as it becomes clearer and clearer just how ineffective these controls are, that he might just slowly back away from them. But certainly in Canada, the provinces are probably the great hope because they have some authority to act on their own and frankly, if push comes to shove, potentially ignore some of the federal diktats.
I mean, we have seen some, perhaps not in Canada, but we think we're about to see a U-turn on the NHS worker debacle, where we were going to lose something like 70,000 NHS workers because they had not been vaccinated, and so you know, pressure and occasionally, dare I say, common sense may prevail. We've not heard an official announcement yet, but there does seem to be lots of noises coming out of Westminster that they're going to have another think about it. They're going to reflect upon it and maybe sort of kick the can down the road. So sometimes we can see that pressure when applied appropriately does seem to work, which is something positive, I think. As we know, we've been discussing how we've all been under restrictions of the past 2 years, or protections as they I think Mr. Drakeford calls them in Wales. But as we also know, some people who may have been making the rules weren't necessarily sticking to the rules themselves, hence the Partygate scandal. Well, on the same day that we're recording this podcast, Sue Gray has released her report. Now, it's not 100% the report she may have been writing, because the Metropolitan Police are going to do some sort of investigation into some particularly egregious parties of some description. So it's not what it might be, but she has made has made her thoughts pretty clear. The Prime Minister, fair play, faced up to it and did his latest apology, and has come out with some ideas as to how number 10, as it were, the bureaucracy there can be made better, and how you should trust him to keep going. There's talk of the creation of an office of Prime Minister with a permanent secretary at number 10. Apparently, whoever's supposed to be doing these things in number 10 is currently not in number 10, but in an office elsewhere in Whitehall. And some talk of looking at the civil service and the special advisor codes and making sure that they are enforced. Harley, have you been watching today's events unfold?
Not specifically. I'm aware, obviously, of what's gone on, and the Sue Gray report was kind of inevitable. Let's be honest. We all knew what had gone on. We all knew that Boris Johnson was lying from the beginning, as Boris Johnson is one to do and has been one to do for the majority of his career, as indeed most politicians at some point or another. I would say a majority of points or another are also one to do. This is not surprising. It's not news as such. For me, obviously, we can get into what Boris Johnson did wrong and whether we believe the parties were wrong from a standpoint, obviously, where we believe that the lockdown restrictions were a bit ridiculous to begin with, and probably would have and did do exactly the same as he did. But I think that the real issue here is we kind of getting in, or not we specifically, but the media, and especially the kind of Labour Party and the lockdown fanatics, are getting into this argument that Boris Johnson has done wrong, and getting away from, or trying to distract from, the actual argument, which is that they didn't believe their own policies because they're ridiculous, and everyone knows they're ridiculous, and actions speak louder than words. Boris Johnson wouldn't have gone to a birthday party or any other kind of office party if he believed there was a serious threat, and he didn't believe there was a serious threat, and neither did Dominic Cummings when he drove all the way up the country, and neither did Neil Ferguson when he was breaking lockdown to sleep with a woman, I believe, possibly married, and the same for Matt Hancock as well. Incidentally, you'll notice that all of those people were the architects of the lockdowns, which we were expected to follow. The man in charge of implementing the healthcare and health sector, Matt Hancock, obviously, Dominic Cummings with the marketing in the early days, Boris Johnson, the leader, Professor Neil Ferguson, the intellectual linchpin. None of those people adhered to this because they don't believe it, because it's nonsense.
Well, that's the interesting point, isn't it? It's you've got the sort of the hypocrisy angle, just generally, but obviously, they didn't seem to be too concerned themselves. On the one hand, they were, let's be clear, fear has been the huge factor that's been used by the government in the widest sense of the word, and indeed, governments around the world, to persuade people or to cajole people into accepting these limits on their liberty that people would never imagine that they would put up with. Fear is a massive factor in that, and yet they themselves didn't seem to be too scared. So yeah, it's been an eye opener, I think, for some people. So Mike, what have you made of the Sue Gray's report today?
Well, obviously, limited opportunity to read a redacted report doesn't give you too much, but the as we speak, obviously not very long after it's come out, the reaction from the House of Commons seems pretty bad for Boris, from what I'm reading on tweets and what have you. One of the PPSs, whose name escapes me, but who I was none the wiser when I saw, has resigned. I know that won't make a massive difference, but this is how these things start sometimes. And as I look through the detail that I've seen so far, and it's the cases that have been investigated or are being investigated by the police, the ones that aren't, what ones Boris was out or not at, how they need to reorganise so that people understand, so that in future you don't have this culture that you've got in number 10 or not. All I come down to is we understood the rules. We could follow the rules. Maybe we didn't always, but we could follow the rules. We understood the rules. Everyone we know understood the rules. Why is it, how is it that the people that created the rules didn't understand them? And I believe someone, a Conservative MP in the House of Commons today, asked Boris about, after giving an explanation of going to his aunt's funeral, socially distanced, not able to speak with his family, many of his family not able to attend, if Boris thought he was a fool. No matter how important Boris is to the Conservative Party, no matter how important he is to the Brexit process or anything else, I can't get past that thought that he thought we were all fools, and the people he surrounded himself with thought we were all fools. And I don't see how Boris ultimately survives past that thought.
Well, he seems to, at the moment, be going for, a huge overhaul of the operation, as it were. On the one hand, this creation of the office of Prime Minister, and on the other hand, we're being promised, as it were, Operation Red Meat. Is that what they're talking about? Where there's, I don't know, it's levelling up stuff, and I don't know, maybe they'll do something about the migrant crisis, some such thing. So that's what the tactics seem to be at the moment. Possibly, I suppose, the fact that there's this ongoing Metropolitan Police investigation may buy some time with some people who will wait to see the outcome of that before perhaps stabbing Boris in the back. And of course, what they'll do, if depending on how long that takes, we may actually get to those May local elections and see some real results rather than some opinion polls. And of course, that's going to play on the minds of many Conservative MPs, particularly in swing constituencies. So we'll just have to see how that goes. Was interesting, I thought, from the little videos I've seen, that Boris was in having sort of been kind of humble at the beginning of his statement and apologising and all that sort of thing. He did seem to be in interesting form, pointing out at one point that Starmer failed to prosecute Jimmy Savile. It was like, well, why hasn't he said that before? Although on the other hand, perhaps it's a bit of desperation at this stage. I don't know, but he seemed to go after Starmer, and as you say, all the leaders of the opposition parties have been calling for Boris to resign, as you would expect. And good old Blackford from the SNP managed to get himself kicked out pretty deliberately of the chamber. So in his usual form. But Mike, you said you think that Boris probably won't survive this in the whether it's in the next few weeks or the next few months. And we talked on the last podcast about potential Conservative Party leaders. Well, somebody has actually put their hand up and said that they'll be throwing their hat into the ring for the leadership. So should it come about? Tom Tugendhat. Ever heard of him? What do you think?
I hadn't heard of him, and I looked him up, and I'm still not convinced I have.
No, I don't think he's a serious contender, but it gets his name out there a bit, doesn't it?
It does indeed. Just want to go back a bit onto the Boris thing, if I may. If he lasts till May, and I've swung back and forth on this. I don't know what Harley's thoughts are on this, but Boris, if he lasts until May, every day, everything he does is going to be about when the police report comes out, when the full Grey inquiry comes out, or it's going to be if he tries to pass a law, he's going to be asked if it's a law that he's going to follow, whether he understands the law, whether he was at the party where the law was proposed or not. And it, you know, I just don't see how keeping him there really does the Conservatives any good. Weirdly, and what might do the Conservatives some good, just something I noticed this weekend from every weekend for those that follow social media, the Labour and Conservative parties in Croydon, and no doubt up and down the country, but I just haven't followed the Croydon ones, will post photos of themselves out leafleting, out knocking up doors, a little group shot. Not all of them, but typically the Labour ones tended to be masks. Typically the Conservative ones tend to be unmasked. Therefore, you could see them smiling. You could kind of tell the Labour canvassers were smiling beneath the masks. But what really struck me is that one looked like the future and one looked like the past. The Labour Party looked like they were dragging us back into lockdown, and the Conservatives were looking like we're looking forward to summer. Just a visual opinion myself, and I say that thinking Labour will probably win in Croydon, but just as a visual effect, I do feel when you look at some of the things that are going on more generally, the Conservatives have that opportunity to strike forwards, and I don't think Labour do. I'm not sure how they do it with the same old leader. I'm not sure how they do it with a leader who's basically his defence. You mentioned Jimmy Savile there was to say, you know, like Jimmy Savile, I won't be prosecuted. That's not a Venn diagram I'll be putting myself in.
Indeed. It's yeah, you wouldn't want to be mentioned in the same sentence, really, would you? Especially if it's you know, a sentence that you come up with yourself. But there you go. We shall see. By the time the listeners are listening to this podcast, who knows what might have happened over the ensuing couple of days between recording and uploading to the system. We'll have to see.
Well, could I pick up on something there that Mike actually said, which I actually think is probably one of the things which Boris Johnson has going for him a lot more than perhaps we might think, and it incidentally, it may also be why he's in the mess that he's in at the moment. You mentioned the photograph of Labour campaigners and Tory campaigners, and the Tories not wearing masks, and the Labour Party campaigners wearing masks. And this is a broader trend which I've noticed of, and one of the reasons why we may or should really be a little bit more nervous about the prospect of Boris Johnson being replaced, which is that the first thing is that these parties that took place months and months and months ago, last year, in fact, and almost a good year ago into it, people have known about those parties for a very, very long time. There've been photographs and videos and audio recordings. This has been sat on someone's desk. This has been sat in someone's phone or email until now. Why is it until now? Well, it's a mighty fine coincidence, let's put it that way, that just as Boris Johnson decides not to go with the SAGE-approved lockdown over Christmas, and just as Boris Johnson tries to break away from the trends in Europe and certain other places in the world like Australia and Canada, that these reports should come out. I think that's something to think about. What is the motivation for releasing those reports now, as opposed to when they happened in the middle of or at the start of the lockdown? So that's the first thing. The second thing I would also say is about the Labour Party in this, and whether we really want to necessarily undermine the Conservative government. I say this as the steward of a campaign group which which is intended to field candidates in opposition to. Boris Johnson and the Conservatives and every other party as well. The Labour Party are reveling in lockdown, in masks, in mandatory jabs or mandatory passports. They were in Parliament last week and over the last few weeks, actually, reading out testimonies of people whose families had died, who couldn't get access to them, and throwing it in Boris Johnson's face. Those were policies that Labour supported and policies that Labour wanted to do in excess of what was already done. And there was one particular one which was in particular highlighted by Peter Hitchens, who everyone probably knows, which was put on the Labour Party page, of a nurse who told a grieving man whose wife was dying in hospital, who was weeping and pleading and crying and screaming at her, to be allowed to see his dying wife, to be allowed to say goodbye, to seek reassurance from her and give comfort to her and tell her that it'll be okay and that he'll manage and that the kids will manage. And the Labour Party presented this not in a critical light, which most rational people and compassionate people would see that. They presented it in a positive light, that this was for the greater good. And I'm personally greatly concerned and also quite emotionally affected by the idea that at some point in the future, we may be led by a politician or by a prime minister and by a party who believes in that kind of policy, in the policy that doesn't allow a husband to tell his dying wife that he will make sure the children are okay, to make sure that he will be okay and that she will be comfortable. That's wrong. That's wrong. And we shouldn't, I think, get too carried away with what Boris Johnson is saying, and actually take a good look at who's opposing him, because they are not good people.
You certainly won't get any arguments about that from Mike or I suspect. So, Mike, you've got some questions for Harley, I believe.
I have indeed. So, Harley, thanks for joining us. Obviously, you've taken over the stewardship of Independence for Liberty, as we mentioned, and just wanted to ask you a bit about that and obviously about yourself for our listeners. So if I could start with, by means of an introduction, can you tell us a bit about your political background?
I certainly can, as unremarkable as it may be. So I am, my first introduction really to politics in terms of a campaign capacity was that I campaigned for vote leave to leave the European Union. Very happy about the outcome there, although not necessarily the implementation. Originally I kind of veered towards a kind of conservative point of view. While campaigning for vote leave, I encountered some dyed-in-the-wool anarchists and discovered libertarianism and Ayn Rand and Milton Friedman and Hayek and Mises and all those great thinkers, and realized that my kind of natural instincts were more towards libertarianism, more towards freedom, more towards not assuming in a kind of arrogant way that I knew everything and deserved to be in control of everyone's lives. So I became a libertarian. I joined the Libertarian Party here in the UK. For a few years, was a campaigner and a speaker for those for a good chunk of time. Decided to try another project shortly thereafter with a now closed political party, which was the UK Liberty Party. We had some great tech solutions with that party, but we came up against social media. And once you're in that box, once you're in that cage, I should say, of social media, and you just can't get your word out, it's a nightmare. It's a complete waste of time. And so we decided to close up that party. And I got the offer, obviously, to come and look after the Independence for Liberty. And I was in that space at the time to help out and to try to forward our mission. So that's really my plans over the next year at least, and moving on from there, depending on how well we do, really.
And so, yeah, if you can maybe share a bit about those plans. What are your hopes for the and plans for the organisation?
Well, I would say, just as a way of introduction, I know you've had a couple of our previous stewards, Chris Wilkinson and Dan Ledicott, on the podcast before. So maybe some people are familiar with us and maybe others aren't, but by way of introduction, we're essentially a support network for independent candidates. So in terms of grand schemes, grand plans, that's not really us. What we're looking for are people who are not really even looking for, just there to support if they need us, are people who are dissatisfied with how they're represented at a local level and want liberty and freedom to be on the ballot in their local area. And so we have a small team of former candidates, electoral candidates and campaigners who are here with materials and all that kind of thing, and advice sessions and all that kind of thing, in order to help people to understand the electoral processes, understand applications and campaigning and debates and hustings and how to deal with the media and that kind of thing. So that's what we do. In terms of our kind of next step, as I said, there's no real grand plans. It's not as if we're putting together, campaigns or whatever. We really are about helping out local people in local areas. And so the most important thing really we can do, and it actually goes back to what we were saying in previous discussions, is to network. You mentioned that with the truckers, the Canadian truckers, that people feel that they're alone and they have these thoughts in their head that they can't express, and to see the truckers obviously driving down the road and to be able to go out and give their support and know they're not alone is really the thrust of our plans now going forward. It's to reach out to as many people as we can, just network, just encourage people to speak to their like-minded friends, speak to their libertarian friends, to not be so insular, to not be so combative, to just let other people know they're not alone, and to try to get conversation going, and to try as best we can to foster a good community spirit within the libertarian community. And hopefully among that body of people, and hopefully with the kind of collegiality that we create from that, we can find some voices around the country who are willing to stand on their own 2 feet to represent liberty in their communities. And that's obviously a long-term goal.
No, excellent. Thank you. And in terms of that standing for liberty in their own community, if someone wants to spread the word of liberty, how might you suggest they make a start?
Well, it's very difficult, as I mentioned, with the difficulties surrounding social media. I mean, I set up my own personal social media, this page, and was fact-checked within 24 hours. That will teach me to say something I never said. So that's good. But I would say the best way really is essentially what I said before, which is to find like-minded people. There are probably more libertarians than you think around, and there are probably more libertarians, especially if you live in a big city. And you guys obviously know this, arranging your meetups. There are probably quite a lot of people around who either don't necessarily know that they're a libertarian, or are a libertarian but don't know anyone who is. To meet up with those people, to find those people, to go for a drink with them, to go for a coffee with them, to message them on Facebook or on WhatsApp and have a chat, to get a little group chat going and have arguments about about politics. That kind of thing is a good way to build up a network of people who are willing to help, to find people who are able to contribute to liberty, and to also spread whatever brand of libertarianism you want to spread. I think that's probably our best way of doing it at the moment from the grassroots. We don't live in a country that's particularly, although we like to say that we live in one of the free countries, we don't live in a country that's particularly open or non-hostile to libertarian or more liberty-based views. We do live in a system of managed opposition. So the issues which libertarians would like to stand on and would like to talk about are typically given over to nut jobs or people who have vested interests. The example I always like to use is, why is Piers Corbyn the head of the self-appointed head, and certainly the media's appointed head of the anti-lockdown movement? It's because he's not a credible source. So it's difficult through official channels. It's certainly difficult, but at a grassroots level, at a friendship level, friends and family, there's no reason why that can't work one-to-one individuals, just talk to each other.
So Harley, so if people wanted to get in touch with you or to find out more about the Independence for Liberty, how can they do that?
Well, we do have a website which they can check out if they want to know more information. Predominantly, we are on Facebook. We have a few people who run pages on there. Like I said, the former steward Dan Lideker is on there. I'm on there, and you can find our name just by searching Dan Lideker or Harley Dalton or Gareth Seward or any of our associates, really. We do have a Facebook page, which is obviously Independence for Liberty. We're in the process of setting up a discussion group at the moment. And so that's the best way to contact us.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for that. It's be interesting to see how you get on in your new role.
Thank you very much. I'll do my best.
So, Mike, what have we got on our website at the moment, and what we've been up to, and what events have we got planned?
Yeah, lots going on, lots going back on, which is great, and lots going on the website. Local elections coming up. So first of all, we've got a interview with Maureen Martin of the Christian People's Alliance. Maureen has been on our podcast. She's written for us, and we've interviewed her before. But specifically this time, we're talking to her about her potential candidacy or proposed candidacy in the ward of Lee Green in Lewisham. So Maureen talks about the party, about herself, about what's needed in Lewisham and Lee Green. One quote about the CPA: we have a comprehensive manifesto that offers a full programme for government. The CPA is a growing party, and we intend to continue to grow until we're in a position to run the country. They are a very ambitious party. They get candidates out. They are not, we just talked about libertarianism, they are not a libertarian party. They are, of course, massively more libertarian than every party in Westminster, which is not necessarily a high bar, but is very much true. So yeah, no, really interesting. Have a read. Someone who's standing in a tough place for it to be a different candidate than Labour, and good luck to Maureen. We've talked about mandates and vaccine mandates, particularly. I took in the anti-vaccine mandate march on the 22nd of January, which was the Together Declaration and NHS 100K march. I've posted some photos up on the site to give you a bit of a flavour of the day. There's a couple of short videos as well, very short, just to give you a sense of what was happening. Really, really good day. Saw lots of our friends up there. Lots of people complaining against mandates. Lots of NHS staff complaining that they would have their jobs taken away from them because of not wanting to take something that doesn't have an effect on transmittability, which is very worrying. But as we've talked about earlier, it does appear as we speak that it's paid off, and we've reversed things. So have a look at that. A really enjoyable day. Nice stroll through London. Got to chat to lots of interesting people. Also, a less joyous note, with the tragic tale of the Croydon Park Hotel. So local listeners will know Croydon Council a couple of years ago bought the Croydon Park Hotel. They brought it for about £30 million, borrowed money that we will have to repay. They have now sold it at a loss of £5 million. Now, as bad as that sounds, probably better than keeping it, because it was costing apparently £610,000 a year to have it empty. We said at the time that this was a bad idea for Croydon Council to be buying a hotel. They have no understanding of commercial property, as is absolutely proven to be the case. They have no understanding of really any sort of sense around money. The story of Croydon Council has been tragic and unfolded. It's tragic for taxpayers in the borough. It's tragic for users of services that are being cut. But yeah, you can have a little read up of what's happened with the Park Hotel specifically. And let's just hope that it's a solitary tale that many more councils around the country learn from. However, there are some good news of things that are coming up. So we had a great event, third Wednesday, no passports required drinks on the 19th of January at the George in Croydon. Really good to see lots of people turn up, lots of new people turning up to these events now, and that's really good. So nice to meet different people who share our worldview. We've got our next drinks on the Wednesday, the 16th of February. So it's our no passport required drinks, 16th of February, and that's the third Wednesday, 7 p.m. at the George. Come and join us. Meet some like-minded freedom lovers, and hopefully a really good event for all. And also our big event, and that we're really looking forward to, with the local elections coming up, is the 24th of February from 7 p.m. at Clyde Hall in Clyde Road, Croydon. And that's our hustings. So we've got a hustings of parties that are standing in and around Croydon, standing in the local elections, and we'll be not necessarily standing everywhere, but we'll be getting candidates up and promoting a greater view of liberty than what we see from the Lib Lab Con. Just quickly run through some of the people that will be speaking at the event, or the people that are speaking at the event. We've got David from the Christian People's Alliance. He ran as a candidate in Croydon South for them a couple of elections ago, and will no doubt be standing in the local elections round here. So the CPA. Zach Sterling, who we've spoken to on our pubcast and interviewed, from the Heritage Party, a local lad as well, who will be standing in the upcoming local elections. Gavin Palmer, who will be an independent candidate for mayor in Croydon, something we've got new for the first time. Lawrence Williams of the Libertarian Party, he's the London and the South East coordinator for them. He'll be speaking. And Steve Kelleher, who's been on our podcast before, who was the SDP candidate for London Mayor, he'll be speaking at our event. Should be a really good evening, a really good opportunity to meet people who are standing for election, which is great, standing up for liberty, standing up for real change. And, if you want change, come and meet these people, come and see what they've got to say. And just if it sparks your interest, come and see people who are willing to stand up in a pretty tough electoral battles for what they believe in.
Yes, absolutely. It should be a great evening. Well, if you'd like to write for our website or have any stories you'd like us to cover, please do contact us. You can do so via the Twitter at Croydon Const, via our Facebook page, via our website, croydonconstitutionalists.uk, or via email, croydonconstitutionalists@gmail.com. Well, do please subscribe to the podcast and the YouTube channel. Do please like, share, and leave a review. It's always good to get feedback, and it helps others to find the podcast. Well, thank you, Harley, for joining us today. It's been interesting to get your thoughts and to hear what you've got planned for the Independence for Liberty.
Well, I hope it was interesting.
I'm sure our listeners would be very interested to know what's going on with the liberty-loving people of this country, and how they can get involved in any little way that they can. And thank you all for listening. Until next time, it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from me.
Stay free, everybody.